You are listening to Rebel Sage Radio. I'm your host, Max Warren. Gentlemen, each week we deliver it real, raw, unfiltered conversations for men. Let's get started. Welcome back, guys. This is episode 3. I want to continue the thread that we started the last time. Last time we talked about truth and consequences. I gave you guys a bunch of different scenarios for things that can happen in life for a man and explained some of the details around this idea of a pathway to power. And I assure you, none of this is new. These aren't my ideas, but these are really important concepts for us to grasp as men. The focus here, when we talk about real, raw, unfiltered, we're talking about conversations that matter. We're talking about conversations that are for adults. We're not going to talk to you like you're a third grader. We're going to give you all of the insights, all of the things that you need, and all of the resources to actually make it happen. And unfiltered means we're going to have adult conversations, guys. This is not rated PG-13. We're not going to say things like golly and gosh. We're probably going to say things like it's brutal as fuck. And we're probably going to say things like it was so painful, I honestly wanted to end it. That's the reality of masculinity, guys. The reality is that there is an edge to it. And at times, being a man in a contemporary setting is actually exhausting, taxing. Takes a lot. It takes a lot to continue to show up. There are men out there, and you know who you are if you're hearing the sound of my voice, that are living in isolation. They're living in a lot of pain. They're misunderstood. They're frustrated. They're angry. They're anxious, and rightly so. The manual for masculinity, particularly contemporary masculinity, is it is just now starting to be brought to the foreground by men who are championing other men and who are starting to speak the truth. And we certainly here at Rebel Sage Radio believe that we are part of that movement and part of that that collective voice in service to men. So guys, in continuing the discussion around practical sovereignty, and when I talk about sovereignty again, I want to give a nod to Dr. Robert Moore. I want to give a nod to Eivind Figenschau Skjellum, who really started this conversation, who have continued this conversation around archetypal approaches to masculinity. The challenge that I have found over the years as I have lived with, wrestled with, and tried to move these archetypal models into flesh and blood is that it's difficult to understand the exact ways to go about embodying the king, embodying the warrior, embodying the magician, embodying the lover, embodying the trickster. We hear about this, but getting to live into it, putting actual shoe leather on these ideas requires something different. So the thing I want to focus on today, we'll probably have about a half hour together. The thing I want to present to you is this idea of practical sovereignty. When does it matter most to be able to choose? I would say having the ability to choose under duress, under pressure, when it is a critical conversation, is the place where the men are separated from the boys. All of us have had situations at work. If you are working for someone else, you've worked on a project and maybe you've had somebody steal credit for your work. You've had someone try to minimize you, marginalize you, step on your dick, get in your space, take credit for what really isn't theirs. All of us have probably in some way, shape, or form been impacted by that. Those of us that have been on the entrepreneurial journey, we have been misunderstood. We've been maligned. We've had business partners decide, hey, you're not as valuable as I thought you were. And there's the door, right? And there has been a measure of betrayal for us as men. There's been a measure of a reality check of when we got in the game of working for ourselves, what it actually costs us. What does it cost mentally, emotionally, financially? Because it is a very different animal than working in a business when you have your own business, which you now have to wear the split hat of being the deliverer, which is working in, and then being the owner, which is working on. That is a vastly different set of responsibilities and roles versus a man who is out in the world who's working for someone, who doesn't really work on the business. He works in the business. There's a particularly defined role and skill set that he brings. And these are very different experiences, guys. What I want to talk about is what's common to all of us as men. And I think what's common is relationships are common, decision-making is common, prioritization is common, and remember we talked about the pathway to power. We're talking about practical sovereignty, right? That we're creating a life based on choice. We aren't creating and manifesting. We're using that word, but we can define that and get a little more clear on what that means. Yes, we're going to bring the woo on the podcast. Yes, we're going to touch into some things that some people will consider less than practical and fringe, but we're going to put meat on the bone and talk about it and explain it, guys. So hang in there with me. So you're creating by default or you're creating by choice. I want you to, for 1 second, suspend your disbelief, and I want you to think about what is it operating on the inside of you that you're unaware of? Scripts, beliefs, things that were imprinted upon you, and I want you to very carefully remember, from the ages of 1 to 7, you are in a completely different brainwave. You are literally malleable, right? So whatever impacted you from the time that you were a newborn until the time that you were around 7 or 8 years old, it's going to shape you. It's going to make you, in a lot of ways, the man that you are today, unless you question it, unless you have a way to see the forest for the trees. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, which is mindfulness practice and how that relates to practical sovereignty, especially when the pressure is on. So we get programmed from 1 to 7. We take on the beliefs and the important things that our family teaches us. I grew up in a household where I was a Warren. And one of the things that was said to me implicitly, it was never said to me, we are Warrens and this is how we are. But it was lived and modeled in front of me. We are Warrens and we work hard. We are Warrens and we work 7 days a week. 7 days a week I worked, right? My parents modeled it to me, passing out at 11 o'clock at night in front of the evening news. My parents would work literally from the time they woke up until the time they passed out. They didn't fall asleep. They passed out. They worked ceaselessly, and they worked to better themselves. They worked to create a better life. And so workaholism was sort of baked into my code, and it was normal for me, 80 to 100 hours a week, right? Now, am I bagging on working 80 to 100 hours a week? No. What am I bagging on? Where's it coming from? Where is it coming from? When you build your identity on this, right? When your identity has been handed to you, and let's just continue with the same example, but I want to give a few other examples. Workaholism, you sanction it. It's normal. It is. Alcoholism. I grew up in a household where alcohol was available. My parents drank. Was it excessive? No, it wasn't. And even despite the fact that we went to church, alcohol was at pretty much every special occasion. Every holiday, there was alcohol. So it was sanctioned. Does that make sense? Guess what else was sanctioned? Christianity. One particular lens on the world, one particular way of seeing life and death and redemption and our relationship to God. That was the only worldview that was sanctioned. And so, guys, I never questioned any of these beliefs. I never looked at any of these scripts. I didn't look until they no longer served me. And I began to question some fundamental things. So what does this have to do with mindfulness and sovereignty? Everything. Absolutely everything. Sovereignty has to do with the fact that you are creating your own life and you are clear on where you are coming from in terms of your worldview. Grab the German word, the Weltanschauung. It's the way you see the world, is the lens through which you view reality and that you understand priorities and morality. What is ethical? What is right and what is wrong? And as a sovereign man, you cannot afford to rent your beliefs, guys. We can't afford to not question the things that we were handed. We've got to take a hard look at it. We really need to look at what we were given. Let me give you, for example, those of you that know my story know that I had a long battle with pornography and strip clubs, and my enmeshment with my mom fed me right into that addiction in a beautiful way. And when did I become aware of it? In my 40s. When did the actual work happen? Late 40s, early 50s. Isn't that a little late in the game, Max? No, wasn't even on my radar. It was the water I was swimming in. I wasn't even aware of it. So I want to challenge you today. How much scripting from 1 to 7 have you consciously unpacked? What in your life have you looked at? And what are you still renting versus what do you own? The real estate in your head, brother, the real estate in your heart. I challenge you that in many ways, and it may make you uncomfortable, and that's okay, squirm and make a commitment to look at this and hear this out, right? I want you to just take a minute. Again, like I said, pause your disbelief, put it in orbit, and take this on for a little while, because this might be a very different perspective from what you're used to hearing. If your life is rented, you are not sovereign. If your belief system is rented, you are not sovereign. If you are not making conscious choices, if you do not have a vision for the relationship with your partner and your children, you are not sovereign. You are living from someone else's script, something that someone handed you, or something that your spouse, partner, he or she brought into the relationship, and they handed you a boilerplate or a template, and they said, this is what relationship looks like to me. And you might have taken that on lock, stock, and barrel. Maybe you just accepted that at face value because, hey man, I love this person and I want them to love me. I want to be a team player. But my question to you is this: how much regret and resentment do you have that you have not unpacked? Do you have a suitcase in your closet in the dark corner of your psyche bursting at the seams with frustration and resentment that's building up, that's going to come to a head at some point, that you just haven't fucking looked at? Hey man, I'm not going there. You know what? I've got enough bullshit at work, Max. Don't ask me to unpack that. Don't ask me to look at that. Bro, I don't even want to go down that road with him, with her. I don't want to have that conversation. Guys, we cannot kid ourselves. The things that we do not look at, and I'll give you a simple definition of shadow, and we're not going to go into shadow work in detail, but it is absolutely part of this conversation about sovereignty and scripting, programming, beliefs, and the rented lifestyle. The things that you deny, repress, and hide, they live behind you in shadow. Shadow can be exposed only in one place: community. Because we have blind spots, and we need other men who can reflect and mirror back to us the things that we don't want to look at. So again, I'm going to ask you to ask you, I'm asking you to ask yourself this question. What right now are you afraid to look at? What right now are you afraid to engage with? And do you feel like, I'm under-resourced here, man? I'm literally just getting through the week. My son just turned 15. Do you have any idea what it's like to deal with a teenager? My daughter just turned 16 and she started dating Max. I just went out and bought me a brand new shiny shotgun. I've got stress, bro. I'm trying to get things done. I don't want to do this deep work. When you do the deep work and you commit to yourself to make space in your life for practices and deeper work, it creates capacity. It creates capacity for you to show up differently at work, first and foremost for yourself, then in the work world, and those you love and treasure the most. Who is responsible for building capacity, gentlemen? We are. That's our responsibility. That rests with us. We cannot ask anyone else to do that work because all of those things reside on the inside of us. So let me tie this into practice, and I want to explain this concept and unpack this concept. Those of you that are in a solid men's community have probably heard the terminology core 4. Hit the core 4, go to war before, or hit the core 4 before you go out the door to go to war. And what does it mean? It means you want to take care of your core practices and fill your cup up and advance yourself and nurture your masculine heart before you engage with the outside world. That includes the people under your roof. This is about you and you and you and God. God as you understand her, him, them. Okay? So whatever pronouns you use, however you hold God, it's important that you understand that there is something larger and transcendent. And I'm not going to unpack that today, but we are going to involve that. So, guys, the core 4 is a practice of 4 main things. Body movement. We call that exercise. For me, that looks like Qigong, that looks like yoga, that looks like kettlebells and maces and walking with a weighted vest. That's my world of resistance training and the physical. When it comes to meditation, dispensa, indispensable in my book, Thich Nhat Hanh, breath work, getting into quiet reflection. There are different phases of meditation. All of them are valid. It also involves writing, journaling, or an audio journal, some form of notation, some form of what are you inspired by? What are you sitting with? What are you wrestling through? It's an amazing tool for personal development. Huge, huge benefits from that. Immediate upside. For those of you that don't journal, for those of you that are hesitating, I encourage you to look at that today because that will be an immediate game changer. You will absolutely get immediate benefit tomorrow from anything you do today in terms of journaling. And the fourth is to continue to grow and learn. We need to educate ourselves. Podcasts, audiobooks, regular books, ebooks, whatever form that information takes, it's consuming that. So just to recap, we've got movement and exercise, we've got breath work and meditation, we've got studying and digging in, right? Reading, educating, nurturing ourselves, learning, and then we've got writing or expressing. And maybe you do that through a blog, or maybe you do that through your own personal journal, or a bit of both. But those are the four pillars, I would say. They are absolutely essential. And I want to pick one of them to focus on for the remainder, and that is this idea of mindfulness, this idea of practice in terms of breath work and meditation. So, guys, without digging into all of the things around how we get scripted as children, I want to focus on the concept that more is caught than taught. And when we say that, what are we saying? We're saying that what's been modeled to us by our parents, the way that they related, it's influenced us. What we grew up in, the environment that we grew up in, the water we were swimming in, it influences how we relate to ourselves. It influences how we show up, and it influences our perception of ourselves, especially when it comes to capacity as men. When someone says, I need this from you, I want this from you, right? If you are raised in a household where your dad was a guy who spoke very little, emoted very little, rather stoic, and the only conflict that you saw between mom and dad was cold, the chances are that you don't have a big repertoire of skill under the belt when your woman or your man, someone in the feminine, if you are in the masculine, and we're making that assumption that you are preferring to be in the masculine, and they are in the feminine, you navigating that is probably going to look a hell of a lot like your dad or your primary male caregiver, right? Because circumstances are different. Everybody was raised different. I have friends of mine that were raised by uncles and grandparents because dad was absent. That's a whole nother thing, right? The absentee father. How many exile princes do you think are running around out there abandoned by dad, like Telemachus in Homer's Odyssey, right? Dad is off at war, never makes it home. Telemachus, raised in the court, but he's raised by a single mother. Telemachus is around suitors, all these other guys that want mom, that want him out of the way. How many of you have felt like that? Does that story resonate for you? Raised by a single mom, raised fatherless, or maybe mom was a work widow, dad worked shift work, mom's raising you, dad's gone. How do you think that impacts your ability to relate to everybody in your life, men and women? But particularly, let's say that this is a standard situation. A man in his masculine and a woman in her feminine. Whatever was modeled to you, the chances of you picking that up on a lot of different levels and carrying out that exact same isolating stoic behavior or shutting down and contracting when faced with the feminine, it's really freaking high, guys. It's really, really freaking high. Now this, look, some of these things are going to be heteronormative, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to same-sex relationships, because you all know someone is holding the masculine and someone is holding the feminine, or they're trading. But in the dynamic of given polarity, particularly conflict, there's going to be someone that needs to lead. And if you're a man that is looking to lead in your partnership, you need to hold masculine structure. And if the only thing that was modeled to you is a shutdown stoic, or dad leaves the field, leaving the field is, I'm not doing this. I'm not having this conversation with you. And that is not the same as a sacred no, gentlemen. When a man is leaving the field, that is not the same thing as, hey, right now is not the time. I'm not going to do this right now. I have a call in 15 minutes and I need to be in headspace to do that. I'll tell you what, I'm wrapping at 4 o'clock. Let's you and I get back together at 4:15, sit down and have a proper conversation about this. I want to hear you out and I want to be fully present, and I can't serve you where my head is at right now. It is only going to lead to further conflict, and I don't want to hurt you and hurt us. That is a sacred no. Nope, we're not doing this right now. I want to do this, but not like this and not right now. That is stewarding a loving container for your partner. Fleeing the field looks like, not this shit again. I'm out. Or slamming doors, leaving, going out to the garage, vacating, not engaging, not listening, not having empathy, not having presence. So in this conflict, given what's been modeled, what would make a difference for the man who wants to be sovereign? How does he show up under pressure, under duress, when the only boilerplate and template that he's been given is walk out, disconnect, shut down, or worse, in my opinion, try to flip the script and say, shut up, you always do this. You always do this. Right now, you're going to do this right now? I don't have time for this. That's not a man. That's a boy. I don't want to be burdened with this. Don't hand me this responsibility. Part of you, I believe, guys, because this was true for me, what I was saying when those words were coming out of my mouth to my significant other, I was telling her, don't bother me with this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with you. And what she heard was, I don't value this relationship. I sure as hell don't value you. I don't need this aggravation. I don't want this bullshit. I was underdone because my meditation practice was off. And in the moment when I was called upon, I did not have the capacity to meet my partner how she needed me to meet her, when she needed me to meet her. So I didn't cultivate that offline when there was no crisis, no conflict, no tension, no requirement. And that is precisely where that capacity is developed. By definition, in my mind, and in the minds of the guys that I spend time with, sovereignty is about what you choose. It is about responding versus reacting. Guys, if you don't have a practice of creating space internally between you and your thoughts, you and the internal noise, you and the intensity of your own emotions, if you don't have a mindfulness practice and you can't get into a quiet space and you can't get into, for lack of a better word, and I think this is a very appropriate term, witness. If you cannot get into witness with yourself, when the time comes, when your partner needs you, when your spouse comes to you, and they have something that they need to talk about right now, or they are in pain, let's say they're triggered. So this isn't just them upset. Something from their childhood has gotten dragged into the present, brought into the present, a familiar situation. It has all the contours and texture of exactly what used to play out when they were little, and they're unaware of it. And you decide you are going to leave the field and you are going to contract because you cannot be bothered. I don't have time. I don't have resources. I'm not dealing with this. Get the hell away from me. Are you going to do this now? That was one of my favorite. Are you going to do this now? I wanted the relationship to be convenient on my terms. Pretty selfish, if you ask me, in hindsight. But the reason being, frequently, guys, I didn't know how to give her what she needed, and it scared me to death that I was going to lose her, or that she would stop loving me, or stop sleeping with me. And that fear is a massive, massive driver. And in the moment when I'm called upon to show up and respond, and I haven't built the practice that gives me the capacity that is on tap, under pressure, under duress. I go to reach for it. I've got nothing. And so what do? I react. It's a knee-jerk reaction. I come back and I argue her down or yell at her or tell her this is inconvenient. I said this to a beautiful practitioner, a woman who was holding the feminine as a priestess. And I said to her, I was unwilling to be inconvenienced by the feminine. I want you to really taste that. I was unwilling to be inconvenienced by the feminine because the feminine doesn't operate on a masculine clock. It operates ebb and flow like the moon. It's a natural, organic ebb and flow. And the feminine energy, whether in a woman or a man, when it shows up, it's inconvenient. It is a force of nature. It is, gentlemen, illogical. How many times have you looked at someone and said, you're not making any sense? That's not even logical. As if that's the only capacity that we possess as human beings. It's the only place that you've got to come to me logically or I won't even entertain this. Really? I'm going to tell you right now, most of the places that are going to make or break your relationship are going to be those places where you are being inconvenienced. And in the inconvenience, under pressure, with limited sleep, and maybe you are feeling the full weight, the full level of, I'm sick of this shit on the inside. You've got your own burdens, your own stresses, your own pains, right? How can he expect me to show up right now? Because you got up in the morning and you sat in silence. Because you got grounded. You found your way into your breath. You got into witness. You've been practicing. You've been building capacity. You have a fifth gear that's available to you because you experience it in your practice when there is no pressure, when there is no stress, when there's no immediate crisis, when leadership is not required, when structure is not required, when you holding a masculine frame is not required. You build it, you cultivate it in secret, in private, behind the scenes, off the radar. And that's what you bring. Think about it like masculine R&D. You're in the lab, guys. You're doing the work. If you're an entrepreneur and you've had to spin up a new idea, work on a website, work on your copy, work on your messaging, do your due diligence on your Google ads, your Facebook ads, your Instagram funnels, that all happens behind the scenes. Marketing, the actual active marketing happens where? Out there, right? But where does all of the work happen? Sitting in bed, looking at your laptop, sitting in the office, sitting at the coffee shop, reading articles, talking to ChatGPT, running things through, building scenarios, trying to understand, learning, relearning, unlearning, right? We as men, and I'm going to even go further, entrepreneurs, listen to me, guys. Even if we build the business and we lose her and the kids, have we really done what we set out to do? Because I'm going to tell you, it's an empty kingdom. It is a painful thing to have built something we love, but we've alienated our family. If you lose your partner, gentlemen, and he loves you and supports you and stands with you, but you find your way forward and you lose him somewhere along the way, or you lose the closeness, the bond that you've poured your life force into, or you hurt him, is it worth it? Isn't the whole point of getting into entrepreneurship to create freedom and bandwidth? Isn't it meant so that we can have more of life, not less of life? It's a bit of a case of missing the point sometimes, guys. What I'm saying is this. As men who are living in a contemporary environment, which is competitive, constantly changing, in flux, that requires us to be smarter, stronger, faster, and have more on tap in terms of courage and emotional fortitude with the people in our lives, this is something we have to commit to. It's a lifestyle. Core 4 is a lifestyle. It's not optional. It's what's needed. It's what's needed to develop the skills that we need to develop for intimate relationships to be fulfilling. And there are always going to be trade-offs, and we're going to miss it sometimes. We're going to have times where, we just fundamentally did not have it under the hood. But guys, getting clear on the fact that we need to develop capacity around this so that we are able to show up the way that we want to for those that we love the most is mission critical. And we could talk in another segment, which I'm going to bring on some guys that know so much about the whole world of addiction and the way addiction affects us as men. I feel like I can speak to it, but I would much rather have you guys hear from these men because they are beautiful human beings, not only doing the work, but leading communities doing the work. And we're going to bring them in so that you can hear their gold. You can really hear the lessons learned and the things that not only that they've done, seen, participated in, but what they lead whole communities in terms of practice. So let's come back to simplifying this and just kind of drilling down for a minute on mindfulness. So those of you that are unfamiliar with mindfulness, there are tons of apps out there. Tons of apps. Insight Timer is one that's out there. YouTube is an incredible resource for all things Adyashanti and Joe Dispenza, both guys that I would highly recommend that you study and check out their stuff. Dispenza's meditations are unique and powerful. They are the sauce. This is a guy that's done his homework and he understands the way we work. He understands quantum big time and how it affects us. The other thing too, old school Buddhist style, counting your breath. Sitting, counting your breath. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Plum Village app is on my phone. I use it all the time. The 20-minute meditation that is Tay's meditation. It's sort of like, it's core Thich Nhat Hanh meditation. And it begins with breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. In, out. That's simple. Basic, fundamental awareness on the breath. Now, the byproduct, the fruit of your mindfulness practice, gentlemen, as you begin to dig into this practice, and I would suggest that those of you that are not meditators, 5 to 10 minutes, start with a timer. Start with guided meditation. Sometimes you might be sitting there saying, Max, it sounds interesting. I'm curious, but what's the gateway drug? How do I get in the door with this? Guided meditation. Well, lots of them out there. And guided meditation will help you become aware of your breath, your body, how to notice, how to sit. But what you're aiming at is you want to sit eventually for 20 to 30 minutes at a time because it allows you to shift state. And state is simply where you are, breath, body, brainwave, what you're focused on, where your attention is. You are shifting from an external focus to an internal focus. You're coming into alignment. You're coming into witness. You're dropping into the space in between thoughts. You are no longer subject to the noise. And the beauty is you're building the capacity that is required for you to be effective in the outside world. So when we use that idea of hitting core 4 before we hit the door, before we go to war, you are building capacity. You are setting yourself apart. You are changing the game, gentlemen. And this is something you have direct control over, right? So a sovereign man responds and does not react. Where does that capacity come from? It is cultivated daily in mindfulness meditation and quiet reflection, your ability also to meet yourself with compassion. When you have compassion for you, you can bring compassion to those around you. Even people in their own way that annoy you, that piss you off, that frustrate you. You can be the adult in the room. You can be the person that sees it clearly. And you can, guess what? Lead. You can guide. You can offer reflection. You can bring a different air, a different vibe to every conversation. One of the things that I always found frustrating about certain spiritual practices was the idea that just read the book and pray and you've got it handled, right? And guys, this is not just true of Christianity, of Western American Christianity. There's kind of this diluted bubblegum pop version of spiritual practice everywhere. It's all over the place. And the wise Christians, the mystic Christians, are quick to criticize that bubblegum pop approach to spiritual practice. It requires us to have a man's version, a grown-up adult version of spiritual practice that leads us into a deeper understanding of ourselves, that puts us in touch with our physiology so we can regulate our breath. How much conflict have you been in where you could feel yourself breathing shallow and getting pissed off and no longer listening to what the person was saying? You're waiting for them to shut up long enough for you to say, this is what I think. Let me tell you something, right? Defensiveness. That's reacting. It's not responding. Let me tell you about you. What gives you the right to, right? And we're defending. Brother shared the other day, he was in a situation with family, and jokingly but painfully, his partner was saying some unkind things, roasting him. It was an uncomfortable situation. Now, he handled it beautifully. Stepped out, caught up with himself, took a few conscious breaths. Guys, this is the practice. This is the work. Stepped back in, spoke to her on the side. Hey, not really appreciating the direction of this conversation. Don't like the way this feels. Right? That boss move. Absolute boss move. This is the way that we get things done. How many times have you seen a couple take a run at each other publicly and it's really hard to watch? Especially if alcohol is involved and their judgment is impaired. I'm not knocking alcohol. I'm just speaking to the reality of how many times have you seen it at a party? There's unaired stuff and it comes out publicly and it comes out sideways. It's hard to watch. It's sad. It's a loud commentary on the health and the quality of that relationship. So guys, I wanna bring us full circle, and I want to come back to where we started. We need to get to know ourselves better, Nosti Sitan. We need to get familiar with our stories, our shadows, our pains, our hurts, the things that trigger us, the things that take us back into regressive behavior, that put us in the place where we are not we're in the adult body, but the 7-year-old is grabbing the wheel. And one of the ways that we can unscript ourselves and become conscious of these patterns as they're happening real time is breath work and meditation. That is a key to undoing these things that keep us locked in patterns within ourselves. Because remember, guys, I will say this again and again and again. You relate to you unless you've become consciously aware of it, by and large, the way your parents taught you to relate to you. You ever stand next to a guy and he'll call himself out and be like, way to go, John. That was so stupid. Nice job, idiot. Whose voice is that? Whose voice is that? Mom, dad, caregiver, right? But it's been internalized. And you're not going to call it into question if it's subjective. It's right in your face. It's not objective. You don't have an objective relationship with that internal dialogue. You have a subjective relationship. You're not aware of it. Mindfulness and meditation practice puts you in a place of being able to self-author real time in the moment. You become aware. Oh, I see that. And guess what you can also do? You become aware with compassion, not judgment. And you could bring that skill set that you develop, that relationship with yourself, the degree to which you love and accept yourself, gentlemen, the degree to the work that you've done and your willingness to look at your stuff and fully love and accept yourself, that is the degree and the capacity to which you will bring that same spirit and attitude to your partners, to your business partners, to your employees, your vendors, your children, your spouse. You cannot bring to them what you will not offer yourself. If you've never been there and it's foreign territory, how could you possibly expect to have that available to offer to anyone around you? Fundamentally, we have to make conscious choices to recognize where our limits are. where our capacities are and be honest with ourselves, right? Hey, we're right back to truth and consequences. Our willingness and our ability to tell ourselves the truth. Our willingness and our ability to look at ourselves first, to come into a loving and accepting place with ourselves and our limitations and build capacity with intention. We choose it every day. We choose it every day. Next time we get together, guys, and it's just you and me and the mic, what we're going to talk about is the victim mentality. I really want to dig into this notion of the victim mentality. I will do a full episode on this notion of Core 4 and talking about capacity. I will make recommendations of resources and books. Out of the gate, those of you that are curious about building capacity, if you are not familiar with John Wineland's From the Core, get it today. In fact, get it on Audible and get the printed copy. Sit yourself down and soak in it. Just soak in it. It will serve you in ways that are unimaginable. I will tell you, because as you become more aware of it, you will come to understand it and value it all the more. The other thing too is you want to grab a copy of G.S. Youngblood's The Masculine in Relationship. My guys and I in Noble Counsel went through this together. Game changer. Absolute game changer. I encourage you to take advantage of all of the resources that are out there. There are amazing men and amazing communities doing great work, guys. We need to avail ourselves of it. We need to make ourselves sponges, and we need to put it into practice. We need to consciously evolve. We need to consciously choose to evolve, because if you don't get into a place of understanding forced adaptation as a man, if you don't look at growth as being forced adaptation where you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you will not grow. You will stagnate. You'll regress in some areas. You'll go backwards. Is that a threat? No, it's an absolute certainty. You're either going to grow, you're going to stagnate, or you're going to regress. And you get to decide. What quality of life do you want? What do you want for yourself? What are you going to bring to those around you? If you're in a pursuit of sovereignty, if you're on the pathway to power, if you want this to be a lifestyle, then you need to avail yourself of the resources. You need to make the time in your schedule to fill your cup, nurture your masculine soul, and move in a direction of wholeness by getting in community. Guys, that's all we've got time for this time around. I so appreciate you checking this out. It's an honor to serve you in this capacity. Stay tuned for more. Really excited about the lineup of guests that we've got. And these guys are assassins. They are the ninjas. They are some of the best voices and best practitioners and best men out there in the biz. We are going to bring them to you here, and I am honored to be able to do that and facilitate that. As always, if you have questions, hit me up at max@rebelsage, officialrebelsage.net, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to comment, and stay tuned for the next one.